This is chapter 6. It's called Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Let us now focus on the entwined lies used in bullying and gaslighting that contribute to institutional complicity. The quicker you realize that you're being lied to and understand why, the safer and saner you will be. It's hard to recognize the lies that fuel bullying, gaslighting, and institutional complicity because they hinge on a contradictory presentation, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. A reference frequently used in media and popular culture, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde describes an abusive split personality. The respectable doctor and the murderous alter ego are ineffective shorthand to quickly describe the dual presentation of bullies, gaslighters, and those who enable them. In 1886, Scottish author Robert Louis Stevenson's book, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, told the story of an upstanding, moral, good doctor and his hidden urges to be callous, immoral, and violent. To cover up his murderous conduct, the doctor creates a potion that morphs him into a different figure, Mr. Hyde, and notice the echo of hide as in hide and seek. Ultimately, his potion begins to malfunction, and he loses control of when he is the doctor and when he is the abuser. As he loses his own sense of self and consciousness, Dr. Jekyll writes a letter explaining his terrible and strange case and hoping that he, as Mr. Hyde, will commit suicide. At first, it is believed that Mr. Hyde is found dead in Dr. Jekyll's laboratory, dressed in the doctor's clothes. Then the doctor's letter reveals that indeed he is both Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the respected physician and uncaring abuser. You would never expect professional, honest, respectable Dr. Jekyll to tell a lie. You would not anticipate that he, in fact, may harm you, even destroy you. It would never occur to you that he is somehow presenting a facade, being two-faced, drawing you into a hall of mirrors, ultimately making you question your own ability to understand and reach sane conclusions. He is the pillar of society, which begs the question, who are you? This moment of doubt may grow until you start to find yourself confused, unbalanced, struggling to think straight, and yet the fact is, life-saving Dr. Jekyll is also dangerous Mr. Hyde, and you are nothing to him but in his way. He will not hesitate to cast you aside or destroy you. What's worrisome for us in the workplace is that one of the most pronounced skills of the dark triad is the ability to hide. Psychopaths have a talent for hiding their true selves, so one could expect many to go unnoticed and uncounted. Even more worrisome is the way in which those who uncover the dark triad are swiftly penalized. It is this institutional psychosis we unpack in the Gaslit Brain. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in institutional form is the caring workplace community where an employee has put in years of devoted loyalty and hard work. That transforms into a callous workplace community as soon as the employee speaks up about bullying, abuse, or corruption. The institution, with its mission statement and pillars, vision, and values, fails to properly address allegations of bullying, abuse, fraud, corruption, and so forth. Over time, due to the failure to deal effectively with these serious problems, the institution finds itself in a negligent position. Now, Dr. Jekyll, symbolic of the esteemed institution, must figure out a way to manage the hidden abusive underbelly while not exposing his or the institution's reputation. The need to hide or cover up empowers Mr. Hyde, who struts around the institution as a ravenous and prey-driven as a wolf. Think Hollywood higher-ups who were repeatedly complicit with the reported abuses of producer Harvey Weinstein. Think of the many figures from USA Gymnastics to the FBI who failed to halt Dr. Larry Nassar's abuse for decades. Think about the athletic director, the legal team, the assistant coach, who all failed to halt the homophobic abuse being hurled at athletes by Coach Mike Rice at Rutgers University. Think about the prestigious leaders at Penn State University who failed to halt the abuses by Coach Jerry Sandusky and went to jail. Imagine the cardinals and bishops who have facilitated the sexual abuse of children by Catholic priests. I could go on and on, referencing well-known institutions in the past decade who have systemically covered up abuse. Julie McFarland notes that there are many reasons for a listener to resist an account that describes someone with institutional status and power as a rapist, harasser, or abuser. One major reason is the split personality of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, coupled with the experience of being targeted unjustly for bullying, then suffering the manipulative lies of gaslighting. It makes no sense to the brain. Gaslighting alone is enough to scramble the brain's mission to turn endless data into coherent narratives about reality. How can the brain produce a coherent story when gaslighting reverses relationships into a mirror image, where everything's backwards? The brain is baffled. As McFarland notes, it's easy to see why not believing a complainant is a far easier course. The brain seems to reason that if the complainant is not telling the truth, then the whole cognitive, emotional, ethical crisis vanishes. Far too often, the brain defaults to choosing the easy way out and deciding that the complainant is not telling the truth. In part 3, we look at ways to stop the brain from selecting this short-term path and instead keep it on the straight and narrow path of believing the complainant that serves it and the truth far better in the long run. In my workplace, I witnessed the cover-up firsthand. Action to protect victims was promised until it became apparent that leaders in the board had been informed at least a full year earlier and had been negligent in halting the abuse. That's when the elaborate cover-up began. That's when the institutional Mr. Hyde came out swinging. None of this is strange or surprising. Messengers who speak up in institutions to alert them to abuse or corruption or safety issues are the ones who get shot. Recognition of the injustice of shooting the messenger goes back to ancient Greek theater, and it still applies to how we operate today. The institution is afraid of the truth and tries to maintain the illusion of duty and ethical practices at all costs. This is why Inman says whistleblowers need intestinal fortitude. Recognition of a two-faced manipulator also dates to ancient times. In the New Testament, Jesus warns, quote, "Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves." Dr. Jekyll presents as a false prophet. Dr. Jekyll presents as a sheep, but he's a wolf. He's a Mr. Hyde in sheep's clothing. And note that the wolf is ravening, namely very hungry and hunting for prey. This description alerts us to just how dangerous and destructive these split personality false prophets are, whether in individual or institutional form. Abusive individuals compulsively, obsessively repeat their abuse day after day, year after year, decade after decade, if not stopped. Their hunger is never sated. Their predatorial nature is always on the hunt. Luckily for us, in the past few decades, psychiatric and neuroscientific experts have studied the minds and brains of these ravenous wolves in sheep's clothing. The knowledge of scientists can help us escape the clutches of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde while maintaining our sanity. There is a general awareness that the dark triad preys on targets, but it is less well known that they prey just as dangerously on higher-ups. Quote, "The first step towards success is to build one-on-one relationships with important individuals in the company who will ultimately, often unwittingly, provide protection and cover for the intended plan of action. The sometimes rather elaborate charade or psychopathic fiction that is ultimately woven throughout the organization also fulfills the psychopath's need for game playing, thrill-seeking, and control. It requires a pretty elaborate gaslighting charade to turn heaven into hell and hell into heaven, which parallels the repeat pattern we see, whereby workplaces protect those telling lies while ousting those telling the truth. Those who bully are enabled, and those who are victims transform into perpetrators.
all of this baffling reversal belongs to the world of psychopathic fiction, from which higher-ups are not immune. In fact, they're specifically manipulated to participate. Brain science can help educate leaders, managers, and HR in institutions to better identify the dark triad, who will groom them, make them complicit, and set their institution on a downward path toward all kinds of negative outcomes. Loss of top talent, burnout, high turnover, low productivity, low morale, disengagement, profit loss, being fired or having to resign, lawsuits, fines, negative media exposure, reputational hits, and jail time. Psychopaths are alive and well in the workplace, and most of us are susceptible to them. If our case study superstars are susceptible, then we all are. Babiak and Hare describe how psychopathic individuals infect others with their falsehoods. Quote, victims will eventually come to doubt their own knowledge of the truth and change their own views to believe what the psychopath tells them, rather than what they know to be true. Let's pause for a moment. It's important to notice just how persuasive psychopaths are. They are so influential that those exposed to them may give up their own knowledge of the truth, which is the key to safety and sanity. If you don't know what's true or what's real, you are on a slippery slope into confusion, self-doubt, vertigo, and a degraded brain. How far is it from the manipulative workplace to a manipulative cult? Once indoctrinated into a cult, you are in a mind that believes a spaceship is coming to take you to a higher plane, or that it's okay for someone to brand your body, or that poisoning your children and watching them suffer is acceptable. These cult followers have changed from reasonable and healthy people with their own views into people with dementia-riddled brains who believe what the psychopath tells them rather than what they know to be true. Ask yourself, do you know it's false that a spaceship is coming for you? That someone burning their message onto your body is wrong? That poisoning children is a cruel form of murder? Now imagine what has happened to your brain so that you no longer could recognize the truth of these statements and instead replace them with a psychopath's myth. The remarkable power of gaslighting, and the reason it's a favored tool by those who seek to dominate, is that it fragments, divides, confuses, and shatters victims. It scrambles their brains. What's key to understand is that the psychopaths have damaged brains as well. They were likely once victims. Their brains were eroded in key regions, and now they repeat the damage to others. It's a horrendous cycle. The brain is easily misled into trusting the institution in which it works and has served for decades. Putting in place strategies to protect ourselves from psychopaths within our institutions can keep us safer. Even if we're experts at seeing enemies outside, we need to apply the same brain power to identify and be highly strategic with the enemies inside or in charge. Remember that positions of power, credibility, and social standing do not mean that the person occupying them is safe and trustworthy. It seems melodramatic, but it is not a bad idea to ask oneself if the person is in the dark triad. Only the experts can give a diagnosis, but it offers us protection to be aware of how they operate, what's happening in their brains, just in case we're targeted for bullying and gaslighting. Ironically, our innate empathy leads us astray. We assume that because we are quick to connect with others, care about them, feel their pain, the dark triad also are wired this way. In fact, their brains are wired very differently. If you put a healthy brain into an fMRI scanner and show them images of people being bullied, humiliated, hurt, ignored, berated, and so on, the emotional regions of the brain would activate. In contrast, if you show these same images to a dark triad brain, you will not see limbic or emotional arousal. Babiak and Hare explain that the psychopath's, quote, response seems to be more cognitive or linguistic than emotional. As if that weren't enough to worry you, they add, quote,
their callous indifference to the plight and inner pain of others is more akin to that of a predator to its prey. If you cast your mind back to our 4 case studies, we watch this kind of destructive relationship unfold repeatedly. It takes callous indifference to ruin another person's reputation, livelihood, career, and health. Babiak and Hare discovered that psychopaths do not have a healthy reaction to the kinds of images that make most people's brains react in the emotional or limbic regions. Instead, quote, activation occurred in regions of the brain involved in the understanding and production of language. The fMRI studies showed that psychopaths analyze emotional material in linguistic terms. Their lack of emotion is why they are understood by experts to have a, quote, cold and empty core that enables them to be, quote, human predators. Rather than be brutally animalistic, they are clever and quick to do cognitive or linguistic tricks, such as blame the victim. This combination of having brains that lack emotions and empathy while being adept with cognition and language makes the dark triad very dangerous and destructive. To be influential, persuasive, charismatic, and able to make people give up their own knowledge of reality for your web of lies, you need to be intelligent and skilled at writing and speaking. You need talent in the cognitive and linguistic brain regions. Your superpower needs to include language processing. As we saw from research into telling self-serving lies, you need to practice. The more you tell lies, the easier it gets, and the more skillful you become. In Paradise Lost, poet John Milton gives the psychopathic cult leader, Satan, the gift of manipulating reality into its opposite, one of the dark triad's specific talents. Remember, before Satan gaslights Eve, he rebels against God in heaven. He takes the gift of heaven from his creator and he turns it into a hell of his own making. God casts him out with the other rebel angels and they fall into actual hell, also created by God. The angels are horrified by the loss of their blissful heavenly state as they awaken in the dark fires of their hellish future. Ever the talented cult leader, Satan in this moment articulates his great power. Quote, the mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven. Satan can't create anything, but he can reverse the terms using his gift with language processing. His promise to his cult followers is to turn the hell where they wallow into a heaven. Milton has Satan attribute to the mind this wondrous skill, which in fact is the mind's pathetic and destructive manipulation. Satan says it himself. He turned God's heaven with his mind into a hell. How tragic, and no amount of manipulation, lies, and bluster can bring it back. It's lost. He lost paradise and is now trying to convince his followers that it was all by design to showcase his mental prowess. Of course they fall for it. And next on the agenda is Eve. Abusive individuals might not all be psychopaths, but I wonder if they sidestep feelings such as empathy, guilt, and remorse because their brains are more invested in constructing psychopathic fictions, spreading disinformation, using strategy and language to cover up, being quick with excuses, manipulating with slippery terms and half-truths. As we noted in the previous chapter, Babiak and Hare have found that psychopaths, quote, experience a game-like fascination in fooling people, getting into other people's heads and getting them to do things for them. Their psychological explanation is chilling. Quote, people do not exist in their mental world except as objects, targets, and obstacles. As is well established, psychopaths may show early signs of cruelty to animals who must also be merely objects in their mental world. In terms of other humans, this reduction is the fundamental dehumanizing that informs all bullying from the playground to the boardroom. It can inform whole countries. It has been documented throughout history and is at work today. Once again, let us recognize it as a full-on lie. All humans are just that. All humans have rights and they belong to the human community. At play, at work, at church, in marriage, fleeing war and oppression and poverty, in a retirement home, in sports, in arts, in prison, wherever. The truth is that we are all human and we all have rights. Any other explanation must be recognized as manipulation. In part 3, we study techniques on how to win at this game. If the abuser has a playbook that helps her, we will develop our own playbook, backed by brain science. Babiak and Hare would describe the conduct of the teachers who abuse Montgomery and other students as the macho style. They are aggressive, bullying, and abrasive individuals, less charming and manipulative than the other types. My colleagues presented as both types of psychopaths. When in Dr. Jekyll mode in front of colleagues, parents, and leaders, they were charming. When behind closed doors with students, they were in Mr. Hyde mode. Quote, psychopathic bullies do not feel remorse, guilt, or empathy. They lack any insight into their own behavior and seem unwilling or unable to moderate it, even when it is to their own advantage. Not being able to understand the harm they do to themselves, let alone their victims, psychopathic bullies are particularly dangerous. As we saw with the gift of the sexually loaded t-shirt, they could flip at times into charming their teen victims, but with an uncomfortable, manipulative twist. Whenever I saw my colleagues at meetings, presentations, discussions, and celebrations, they never used homophobic slurs. They didn't sexually harass any male colleagues or use misogynistic language to humiliate or to lure. I never saw them swear at anyone. They didn't get in the face of colleagues or leaders and lambaste them with humiliating rhetorical questions. They never grabbed anyone and detained them for more yelling in the face. They didn't block colleagues from opportunities they had rightly earned. They were charming. Watching for split personality behavior in the workplace can be a savior. When you suddenly find yourself a target of bullying, you think it's about you. Your brain is scripted to respect the position and transfer its power, credibility, and social standing to the one who occupies it. Don't make that mistake. Just remember, dictators are in control of whole countries, but it does not mean they are mentally stable, ethical, healthy, fair, or have intact brains. Look beyond the position. Always do a double take and look at the person. Don't listen to their promises in the future. Look long and hard at their track record in the past. Watch out for your brain's faulty logic. It analyzes the bullying and concludes that being targeted has something to do with you. Its logic is that the dark triad don't humiliate their favorites and their beneficiaries and those who fawn, and therefore something must be wrong with you. It's your fault the dark triad mistreat you. It's you. Your brain starts to work intensely to figure out what you're doing wrong and what about you triggers this kind of maltreatment. Stop. Instead, get your brain to record on paper each instance of maltreatment. Day, time, and place. That's one column. In the other column, record how the bully treats others. If you see a split personality behavior, Mr. Hyde to you and Dr. Jekyll to another, then you should be on high alert. You're dealing with the dark triad. The abuse has nothing to do with you, so don't waste your energy focusing on yourself. Remember, the lie at the heart of bullying conduct is that it is about you. It's not. When the dark triad are exposed, their first attempt to deflect responsibility is denial. They trot out the excuse that they didn't know that what they were doing was hurtful. Don't fall for that lie. Neuroscientist Simon Baron-Cohen explains that the psychopath, quote, is aware that he is hurting someone because the cognitive recognition element of empathy is largely intact, even if the affective empathy, the emotional response to someone else's feelings, is not. We will do a deep dive into Baron-Cohen's research in the next chapter. Babiak and Hare say psychopaths, quote, can turn on the charm whenever it suits them and turn it off when they want. Because of their chameleon-like ability to hide their dark side, they can quickly and easily build trusting relationships, then take advantage of them or betray them in some way. When surveying workplaces that had bullying and abuse, Babiak and Hare found that the dark triad were simultaneously depicted by detractors as underhanded, deceitful, and manipulative, and by supporters as team players and solid corporate citizens. There was a clear split between supporters and detractors who showed a strong discrepancy in perception. Another way to see this split is the division that occurs in bullying between the treatment of beneficiaries and targets. It was as if these groups of coworkers were describing two people instead of one. In short, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Listen to this description of the split personality. Quote, clearly the detractors despised these individuals and the supporters almost worshiped them. It was as if employees were describing two entirely different people. In a great number of these situations, it seemed that the psychopath could switch from warm and friendly to cold, distant, and almost hostile, depending on with whom they were interacting. Our brains are always surprised by this contradiction, but they can be trained to anticipate it. In part 3, we do much needed training to take back control from psychopaths, to stop being their puppets, whether they're playing us to trust and adore them or manipulating us to suffer and fear them. Babiak and Hare explain that, quote, the opportunistic, deceptive, and manipulative behaviors of psychopaths can be as bewildering to the victims as they are devastating. What is their exact impact on victims? Quote, many victims become racked with self-doubt, blaming themselves for whatever has happened. It makes sense that the victims become tormented by self-doubt and blame themselves for what's happening. Their brains cannot fathom that individuals in positions of power, credibility, and social standing are also ravenous wolves. It does not make sense, and the brain's job is to make coherent stories out of endless data. Babiak and Hare note that experts refer to abusive psychopaths as intra-species predators. Maybe if we taught students in schools and employees in the workplace to watch out for these wolves, no matter how elaborate their sheep's clothing, they would be safer and saner. They'd be less likely to doubt themselves and blame themselves for the predatorial abuse of others who prey on their own kind. Few of us are trained to identify lies, but we are intensively trained throughout our formative years to bow down to those in positions of power, credibility, and social standing. These childhood lessons, reinforced over and over with parents, doctors, teachers, coaches, not to mention administrators of all kinds, wire into our brains to such a degree that they are difficult to unwire. When faced with someone who is not worthy of our respect, let alone our reverence and obedience. Because it isn't happening in society, we need to train ourselves how to recognize liars, because that will keep us much safer and saner when dealing with the dark triad. We must override our impulse to believe someone in a position of power, credibility, and social standing. Do not confuse the position with the person who inhabits it. Babiak and Hare write, quote, pathological lying is a hallmark of psychopaths. They cross back and forth easily between lying and honesty during conversations because they do not have the guilty feelings the rest of us have when we try to tell a lie. Remember the study we noted in the introduction. Once again, it's worth repeating the conclusions in this context. The study was about how the more a brain tells self-serving lies, the easier it gets. The brain researchers' findings uncover a biological mechanism that supports a slippery slope. What begins as small acts of dishonesty can escalate into larger transgressions. Remember, the biological mechanism they refer to is the reduced amygdala sensitivity to dishonesty. Key is that the reduced sensitivity and increased lying occur only when the lies are self-serving. Babiak and Hare learned that psychopaths, quote, will not only blame others, but also create evidence that others are to blame. This takes effort, but psychopaths can easily integrate it into their game, seizing on opportunities to bring harm to others' careers or professional standing. It's vital we learn strategies to stay safe and sane because the qualities of the dark triad are becoming more and more mainstream. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author Chris Hedges writes, quote, the cult of self dominates our cultural landscape. This cult has within it the classic traits of psychopaths. Superficial charm, grandiosity, and self-importance, a need for constant stimulation, a penchant for lying, deception, and manipulation, and the inability to feel remorse or guilt. He identifies, quote, armies of cultural enablers, where falsehoods take center stage and drown out truth and authenticity. This is an accurate description of my gaslighting workplace. The truth tellers were punished. Those who used charm and manipulation interspliced with the lies of bullying and gaslighting were protected. Legal scholar and author Amos Guiora writes that, quote, army of enablers is always there when abuse flourishes in an institution. What did the enabler do? He or she protected their hallowed institution, protect the institution, enable the predator, abandon the survivor. Rebecca Solnit identified that overlap between violence toward individuals, especially women, and violence toward facts and truth. The dark triad are populated by skilled conmen who leave a trail of bodies in his or her wake. The abuser plays on our fear of the harsh truth and manipulates our wishful thinking. As Babiak and Hare discovered, the objective fact that psychopaths don't contribute or achieve in the workplace is, quote, clouded by their self-serving bravado and the mystique that follows them. Psychopaths at home offer a parallel to their hollow workplace contributions that help us see more clearly. Dr. Jekyll appears as a family man. In fact, it's part of a self-serving bravado, an illusion of nurture and care that is actually hollow. In their self-obsessed and self-aggrandizing way, the psychopaths may seek to pass on their gene pool by, quote, the production of a large number of children with little or no emotional and physical investment in their well-being. The stated goal is to have lots of children, but they find themselves exposed to the absence, ignoring, and worse of Mr. Hyde. The illusion is a loving family. The reality is children who are abandoned. The dark triad are professional at projecting an illusion of who they are. Although they find repeat victims, they also find powerful supporters. Despite year after year of abuse reports, their skill at generating the persona of the ideal employee, at being a pretender, makes them strangely untouchable. Although they are, in fact, a liability for the institution, putting it at risk even of lawsuits, they are protected. Babiak and Hare attribute this typical pattern to their ability to establish patrons. Quote, with a patron on their side, psychopaths could do almost no wrong. Powerful organizational patrons unwittingly protect and defend psychopaths from the criticism of others. These individuals eventually provide a strong voice in support of the psychopath's career advancement. At Montgomery School, as noted, one of the abusive teachers held a leadership position built on bravado and mystique, even though her team never wins any championships, which she held onto despite the abuse reports by multiple students. Since I resigned in protest, she's had further complaints and even a lawsuit trying to halt her abuse. But instead of being stopped, the institution and the regulator have kept her conduct mostly secret. And she's being granted an even greater leadership position that gives her power over even more unwitting victims who lack protection from uninformed parents. As Babiak and Hare explain, quote, the success of psychopathic manipulation, especially in large groups of people, depends on maintaining a cloak of secrecy about what is really going on. To see the abuse they heap on victims, the institution must avoid at all costs a culture of secrecy. Montgomery School didn't just have one patron for the abusive teachers who were coaching, but an army of patrons. Analyzing another sport abuse crisis, Guiora describes the training conditions for American gymnasts prior to the conviction of Dr. Larry Nassar, who has been sentenced to prison for life. How is it possible that a doctor abused hundreds of athletes? A survivor creates the scene, quote, screaming coaches, humiliating training sessions with the girls expected to be robotic. All methods of training were on the table, no matter the physical and emotional consequences. In the testimonies I took at Montgomery School, they described the same maltreatment word for word. They also used the word robotic. They were like puppets with the teachers pulling the strings. Remember Babiak and Hare's discussion of the puppet master, who they see as one of the deadliest in the psychopathology spectrum. An abuse survivor told me that the most devastating moment for her was when she was injured and her coach dismissed her, saying she was now a, quote, broken toy. Abusers typically threaten targets with how replaceable they are. When you don't have emotions and empathy operating healthily in your brain, then it makes perfect sense that you dehumanize and objectify targets. I am constantly amazed by how textbook abuses, as Giora puts it, institutions that enable abuse, quote, follow the same script. The good news is that if abusers and the institutions that enable them have a playbook that tells them how to manipulate and abuse and get away with it, then we can write a better playbook on ways to see through their manipulations, refuse their abuse, and hold them accountable. Echoing the despairing vision of Hedges, Giora finds armies of enablers when it comes to abuse. Quote, while one army is significant, several armies are literally insurmountable. They come at you from different directions. They use every strategic and tactical advantage possible, and they have unlimited resources. They carry the prestige of seemingly reputable and esteemed institutions. They represent success and power. They are arrogant. They are dismissive. They are deceitful. They are punitive. That is the most accurate description of the battle you must wage against the army of enablers in institutions that are full of bullying and gaslighting. It's easy to retreat into wishful thinking, but the truth is all we have that stands between us and insanity. I think it's worth fighting for. A child of Holocaust survivors, Giora is clear that those who follow the script and enable abuse in all forms are reprehensible. Quote, in deciding not to act on behalf of the person in peril, bystander and enabler alike facilitate the harm caused by the predator. He argues that both bystander and enabler have a duty to the victim, and those who fail are condemned in no uncertain terms. It is another example of how psychological abuse, unlike physical abuse, can be worse the more passive it is. The more one does not act, the more harm one may do. The failure to positively act, to provide assistance or prevent future harm in accordance with that duty, resulted in terrible consequences to an innocent person. Why? Because the enabler and bystander made the decision to walk away, literally and figuratively. That is the essence of abandonment. Both the bystander and the enabler are of paramount importance to the predator. That understanding directly contributed to my decision to pursue this project. Imagine a leader abdicating his duty. Now imagine a leader and others in the institution not just walking away, but pouring salt into the victim's wounds. And the victims are children, as was done to Montgomery and the other students. They weren't just abandoned. They were publicly labeled as liars. Giora notes, quote, the perpetrators were enabled by individuals whom the survivors similarly trusted. The theme of trust then is of paramount importance, for it is at the core of what was shattered by perpetrator and enabler alike. Julia McFarland sees this shattering of one's belief system as arguably the worst phase of the abuse cycle. It helps learning and remembering to look at individual stories. The reason that we spent time examining targets of bullying and gaslighting in part 1. Let's now look at some perpetrators of abuse to understand why institutions all too often protect them. These real-life examples of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde characters show how easily they fooled us. A recent high-profile case of a split personality is Sam Bankman-Fried, founder and CEO of the wildly successful cryptocurrency exchange FTX. When he was indicted on 8 criminal charges and in jail awaiting his trial, Carolyn Ellison, former CEO of Alameda Research, which Bankman-Fried also founded, pleaded guilty. Ellison provided the court with a glimpse of the inner workings of FTX and Bankman-Fried's carefully curated public persona. Bankman-Fried, quote, cultivated relationships with reporters and maintained a Twitter presence as part of his effort to present himself as a very smart, confident, somewhat eccentric founder. Cultivating relationships with influential individuals is textbook for those with split personalities who project the power, credibility, and social standing of a Dr. Jekyll while ensuring that no one finds out about Mr. Hyde. The wolf is carefully cultivating sheep's clothing. Maintaining a presence as a compelling Dr. Jekyll is used to cover up fraudulent and destructive tendencies of Mr. Hyde, who can ruin victims psychologically, physically, or financially. Ellison provides another textbook component of the split personality in her description of Bankman-Fried. Like others in this psychological or neurological category, it appears that Bankman-Fried saw himself as unhampered by rules and apparently above the law. Asked in court what his philosophy was on rules, she replied that Bankman-Fried thought of himself as a utilitarian, and he believed that the ways that people try to justify rules like don't lie and don't steal under utilitarianism didn't work. Utilitarianism believes that actions are right if they benefit the majority. Another way it's expressed is that action is right if it promotes happiness, and the greatest happiness of the greatest number should be the guiding principle of the conduct. This philosophy works for those with financial resources and power. It's not great for those without either. Bankman-Fried feels that he does not need to obey rules or laws because he is causing happiness to many people while fleecing millions from a minority of investors through fraud. If it benefits the majority, then it must be right, according to Bankman-Fried. The leader at Montgomery School announced to faculty and staff that he had heard from some students who had had an unhappy time, and now he would like to hear from students who had had a happy time. Besides how remarkably offensive it was to minimize and dismiss reports of victims of abuse with this kind of language without supplying any detail about what had been done to them, you can see a parallel with Bankman-Fried's thinking. Like the entrepreneur committing fraud, the leader's philosophy when it came to student safety from teachers' abuse was that the abuse was right if it benefited most students. If his guiding principle of conduct was the greatest happiness of the greatest number, then the 14 students reporting abuse could rightly be ignored. Likewise, utilitarianism would exonerate the bullying lies targeting Wilson, Carl, and McFarland because the majority were not targeted by them. Let's take it a step farther and say that this philosophy could have gotten Nike off the hook for the maltreatment of female employees because they were the minority. Likewise, the Met Police are off the hook for maltreatment of people in marginalized groups in London because men and white people are happy. It would get the law professor off the hook at McFarland's University because most students were not being groomed for sexual exploitation. Only a handful were targeted. Bankman-Fried's philosophy did not work in the courtroom, and he is now in jail. It's interesting how Carolyn Ellison, once under the sway of Bankman-Fried's gaslighting, believed his justification for not following rules and laws. Ellison reports how his attitude influenced her own worldview. She found herself also lying, covering up, and ultimately committing crimes. She too has been sentenced to jail. The manipulations by the dark triad have the power to seduce others into their illusion of reality constructed on falsehoods. Notably, at the same time Bankman-Fried is pitching utilitarianism to justify and cover up his fraud, he's careful to get others to cover up. Why would you do that if you truly believe the utility of your plan was honest, true, and fair? As Ellison states, Bankman-Fried, quote, warned FTX employees and executives about not putting stuff in writing that could get us in trouble. It concerns me how textbook it all is. When the 4 abusive teachers in my workplace were exposed by so many parents and student testimonies, part of the leadership response was to announce an official code of conduct. If teachers don't know that psychological, physical, and sexual abuse goes against a professional code for educators and students, they shouldn't be teaching. The code of conduct the school leaders suddenly wanted to create would be not only for teachers exposed as abusive, but also for parents and students, as if they had also participated in the maltreatment. It was such an obvious way to dilute what the teachers had done. Then, in the style of utilitarian Bankman Fried, parents were told if they had complaints, not to write them on email. Instead, they needed to report verbally. There is no paper trail when complaints are verbal. Just as at FTX, with its grand philosophy of utilitarianism, it's best to avoid putting stuff in writing that might get you in trouble. If you're lying to others, if you're gaslighting others, the last thing you want is your words on email. Bankman Fried's manipulation convinced others, such as Ellison, that fraud was acceptable. Her initial hesitancy to commit crime was overcome by his economic philosophy, but that put her in the wrong when she adhered to laws and rules. These kinds of reversals are the cornerstone of gaslighting, as we discussed throughout. In a sense, Bankman Fried led Ellison to believe that she was crazy to obey the rules when she could break them within his utilitarian framework, but remember, not to put anything in writing. It all looks so obvious in hindsight, but it's helpful to remember that the dark triad are gifted at pulling the wool over the eyes, even of experts. Bankman Fried's parents are leading experts in legal ethics and social fairness at Stanford University. One may fairly assume that these ethics scholars would identify their son's business dealings as at least full of risk and at worst full of fraud. Sadly, the parents could only see Dr. Jekyll. They could not fathom that he could also be Mr. Hyde. Not only did the parents not recognize his allegedly shady business practices, but even after he was charged, Bankman Fried's mother struggled to believe that her son could commit any crimes. Even when she was confronted with extensive evidence, along with his colleagues who were pleading guilty and testifying against him in court, like Carolyn Ellison. Part of what seems to lead us astray with the lies of bullying, gaslighting, and institutional complicity is the belief that liars manipulate uneducated, inexperienced, or gullible people. Although that may be true, it's also true that they successfully manipulate educated, very experienced, skeptical people, people who are leaders, people who have worked hard to earn their leadership position, who know the difference between right and wrong, at least before the dark triad started manipulating them and their worldview. Many complex issues are at play, many related to how our brains operate. We will unpack that in part 3 to better understand how and why we are all so susceptible to manipulation, even by those closest to us. Sheila Kolitbar interviewed Bankman Fried's mother. To repeat, his mother is a leading expert in law and ethics. His mother said that, quote, her son was incapable of dishonesty or stealing. She went on to clarify, quote, Sam will never speak an untruth. And finally, quote, it's just not in him. Most parents can relate to an overwhelming wish to protect their child and fight for his innocence, but surely she must factor in her son's 8 criminal charges, his incarceration based on his conduct awaiting trial, his colleagues pleading guilty and pointing the finger at him as a fraudulent, manipulative leader, and plaintiffs who have been betrayed and lost enormous sums of money. These facts in the case carry significant weight, especially when one's life has been dedicated to being an expert in ethics and social justice. And yet, Bankman Fried's mother sounds gaslit, cannot shake her loyalty, and shows blindness to betrayal. The case is heartbreaking on many levels. Sam Bankman Fried was convicted of fraud in November 2023 and is incarcerated. His prison sentence is 25 years. It's heartbreaking when parents cannot face the truth that their child is a criminal. They are so dedicated to the Dr. Jekyll gaslighting, they are unable to see Mr. Hyde at work. This same dynamic occurs with sexual predators. According to Ian Simpson, the wife of Jerry Sandusky publicly stated that regardless of her husband being convicted on 45 counts of child sex abuse against 10 boys, she still maintains he is innocent. Likewise, as Jessica Valenti detailed, Bill Cosby's wife publicly stated that despite her husband being accused by more than 20 women of being drugged and sexually assaulted by him, she sees him as the victim. Of course, this claim conveys textbook gaslighting where reversals abound. The perpetrator morphs into the victim. Those who try to hold the perpetrator accountable are on a witch hunt. What's telling about Bill Cosby's wife is that she unwittingly describes her husband as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. She says all she knew of him was his Dr. Jekyll side, kind, generous, and a wonderful husband. As is typical in abuse, she was not targeted, nor did she witness her husband harming others, so she does not believe it could be true. Mrs. Cosby describes her husband's split personality perfectly. Quote, "A different man has been portrayed in the media over the last 2 months. It is a portrait of a man I do not know." Bill Cosby's wife does not understand that she played the role of sheep's clothing that kept the world from knowing she was married to a wolf. She's the suit designed to stop workplaces from seeing the snake. She is the beneficiary, the defender, the normalizer who unwittingly contributes to the Dr. Jekyll construct and keeps Mr. Hyde hidden. The dark triad often work in pairs or small groups where they witness the others abusing targets. By not acting, he or she makes everyone, including the targets, think the abuse is normal and deserved. The role is incredibly important to confuse those who are drawn into the abuse cycle because their brains say, if abuse were happening, the other person with power, credibility, and social standing would surely stop it and protect me and other targets. When that does not happen, then the targets start to begin wondering if it's their fault. They had it coming. They didn't know how to handle difficult people. They're ashamed of being targeted. They deserved it. They start saying, I was bullied because. The dark triad need cover, and ideally it can be supplied by position that has power, credibility, and social standing, or spouses, religious commitment, marching for the rights of others, social engagements in defense of the ones being harmed behind closed doors. One of Montgomery's abusive teachers was a big supporter of fundraising for a handicapped student, but behind closed doors, he listened to the other teacher call the boys fucking retards. Mike Rice was a family man, a church-going man, but behind closed doors, he hurled homophobic slurs at college students. Harvey Weinstein was an absolute champion of women's rights. Behind closed doors, he sexually abused women. Jerry Sandusky founded a home for underprivileged children, but behind closed doors, he raped boys. To recognize gaslighting, you must always look beyond the sheep's clothing to the wolf, the polished words of the prophet to the corruption, the expensive suit and patterned socks to the snake. Most importantly, you must look beyond the title that confers power, credibility, and social standing to the person. Hugh Schofield is one of many journalists who covered the 2024 trial of a French man who drugged his wife, Gisèle Pellicot, unconscious, raped her hundreds of times, and brought other men to rape her. Drugging someone unconscious is a powerful gesture of controlling and silencing. In classic Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde fashion, Mrs. Pellicot had no knowledge of her husband's split personality. As we saw with Mrs. Cosby and Mrs. Sandusky, she did not know the Mr. Hyde side of her husband. When the police first showed her photographs of men raping her while unconscious, she exclaimed, quote, "All that we had built together had gone. Our 3 children, 7 grandchildren. We used to be an ideal couple." Her disbelief sounds like Mrs. Sandusky and Mrs. Cosby, except Mrs. Pellicot no longer believes her husband to be an upstanding, innocent Dr. Jekyll. Mrs. Pellicot and her husband were an ideal couple by day, but at night, her husband turned into violent, exploitative Mr. Hyde. The court tried to control the language in the trial, and they asked Mrs. Pellicot not to call what was done to her rape. They wanted her to use the terms, quote, sex scene. She refused. She told the court when the judge reminded her to, quote, respect the presumption of innocence and use the descriptor sex scene. Pellico said, "I just think they should recognize the facts. When I think of what they have done, I am overcome with disgust. They should at least have the responsibility to recognize what they did." A victim of repeat violence, Mrs. Pellico sounds frustrated with the court's request that she submit to further gaslighting and violence against facts and truth. The court's desire to protect the delicate ears of the alleged perpetrators and ensure that they weren't exposed to a harsh word such as rape to describe what they're accused of is textbook gaslighting. It focuses attention on Mrs. Pellico harming these possibly innocent men with a factual term rather than on the perpetrators documented in photos and on video who came to her home and raped her while she was unconscious. The accused have done violence to the victim, and now they want with the court's support to gaslight. Rebecca Solnit calls it doing violence to facts and truth. However, Mrs. Pellico turns the tables on the whole charade by ensuring that journalists had access to all the unfolding horror and the manipulations that uphold it. As reported on by Tracy Connor, Judge Rosemary Aquilina used the same powerhouse strategy in 2018 when she gave the hundreds of victims time in her courthouse fully open to the public and media to tell their experience of abuse at the hands of Dr. Larry Nassar and the impact it had on their lives. Nassar complained to the court in a letter that it was too much for him. The abuse didn't seem too much for him when he unleashed it on hundreds of children, but hearing about it overwhelmed him, and he sought mercy from the judge. He did not receive any protection from Judge Aquilina. As we have seen, Nassar behaved in the textbook way of the dark triad. They present themselves as victims and they reverse their victims into perpetrators. In Mrs. Pellico's case, the court offered her the usual protection of confidentiality as if she could not bear the shame if others knew what had been done to her. Like Nassar's victims, Mrs. Pellico rejected this paternal gaslighting. Quote, Giselle waived her right to anonymity to shift the shame back onto the accused. Taking the stand on Thursday, she said she was speaking for every woman who's being drugged without knowing it so that no woman has to suffer. We see this impulse again and again in victims. They speak up to protect other potential targets. If you want to remember this strategy, just imagine a close-up of Sam Bankman-Fried's young face on the left page of Architectural Digest magazine. On the right is a shot of him standing amid his mission-like quote. He's dressed like a kid in Bermuda shorts, black t-shirt and sneakers, his hair rumpled. His quote, "I'm in on crypto because I want to make the biggest global impact for good." This mighty expensive ad follows a similar two-page layout with supermodel Gisele Bündchen, famously married at the time to quarterback Tom Brady, who was also an FTX supporter. Her quote is, quote, "I'm in on FTX because we share a passion for creating positive change." You can see how pairs work well together. They confirm one another's messaging. They give off the aura of nothing wrong here, or we wouldn't be echoing and repeating one another's statements. But ask yourself, why do they need to say it twice in a mirroring way? Why doesn't Bankman-Fried offer evidence for his claim on the next page rather than bring in a supermodel? Why doesn't Bankman-Fried open his accounts, have quotes from his team, share how his crypto empire makes the biggest global impact for good? The dark triad are experts in mirroring. When you see it occurring, when you hear repetition, when one echoes another, when there's no evidence, when there's only prophetic language, pause. Let your inner skeptic come to the fore. Start questioning. Why is this financial entrepreneur posing as a kid? Why does he present like a mother's son? How will crypto create positive change? Why isn't there any info, just a supermodel perched on a stool? Michael Merzenich can answer those questions from a brain perspective. When you are being presented with associations, not facts, for instance, a football superstar or a supermodel, you are being encouraged to remember FTX through its associations, not its actual offering. Your brain could easily forget the crypto entrepreneur and his company, FTX, but it is less likely to forget the hook of a football star and a supermodel. If those hooks didn't work, then the idea of doing good in the global community might be something that you don't forget. As Merzenich explains, quote, one of the great tricks for remembering is to associate what you're trying to remember with other things that you are not likely to forget, like numbers or friends or relatives or any other such hard to forget hook. I can understand investing in the future and in global impact for good, but I don't see anything in Bankman-Fried's ads that tell me what the relationship is. What good? What impact? How does crypto accomplish this? The investors who did not ask those basic questions lost millions of dollars. As noted, Babiak and Hare inevitably find the dual persona when they take statements from workplaces about colleagues identified as abusive. Some report their colleagues' highly abusive nature, and some defend their conduct as kind and generous. Babiak and Hare are told that he or she is a wonderful boss or colleague. This dual description is frequently the red flag of a psychopathic abuser, a split personality, a Dr. Jekyll and a Mr. Hyde. Bullying and abuse always have both targets and beneficiaries. The targets are the unhappy minority, the bystanders who are silenced by fear or self-protection, and the beneficiaries who get rewards, gifts, and opportunities. And the Dr. Jekyll side of the psychopath form the happy majority. The target reports the abuse, the bystander looks the other way, and the beneficiary defends the perpetrator. It's textbook. Sam Bankman-Fried's parents, Sandusky's wife, Cosby's wife, benefited from the Dr. Jekyll side of the convicted abuser. Their victims, whether suffering physical, sexual, or financial abuse, were initially manipulated and seduced by Dr. Jekyll, but then found themselves harmed by Mr. Hyde. Let's move out of the interpersonal and financial realms into the institutional realm to see if the same vulnerabilities to lying and gaslighting present themselves. We've seen individuals in parental or marital relationships become utterly confused and brainwashed by the gaslighting done by a trusted, intimate connection, whether child or spouse. Financial fraud happens frequently and to many intelligent and informed investors. What's surprising is that in workplaces within institutions governed by professional relationships, the same manipulation and downfall may well occur. Just as doctors take the Hippocratic Oath, nurses pledge in the name of Florence Nightingale, founder of modern nursing, quote, I will not do anything evil or malicious, and I will not knowingly give any harmful drug or assist in malpractice. The position of power over life and death, the commitment to care for vulnerable patients, those in the medical profession are living, breathing versions of Dr. Jekyll, but it means there is always the terrifying, if remote, possibility it's a cover for Mr. Hyde. In 2024, a nurse was sentenced in the United States for being a serial killer of patients. As Paula Ward reports, nurse Heather Presti in Pennsylvania has now been sentenced to serve consecutive life sentences for killing 17 patients and attempting to kill more. Over the course of 3 years, she systemically killed patients in her care with deliberate insulin overdoses. Executive Deputy Attorney General Michelle Kelly Walsh stated after the sentencing, quote, being in the courtroom for today's proceedings, the evidence of her depravity and darkness was only outshone by the light and love of the families that she victimized. In the courtroom, Heather Presti's murderous cruelty was evident, but for years, dressed in her nurse's uniform, it was not. A daughter of one of the victims described being at the care facility the day her father died. She described her encounter with Presti, quote, I looked into the face of Satan myself the morning she killed my father. What's textbook is that Presti made efforts to gaslight her many victims' families so that the psychopath's fictional mask carefully covered up any association with Satan. As another daughter reported to the courtroom about her mother's murder, Nurse Presti, quote, had the gall to send their family flowers and a sympathy card. Is it gall or is it textbook example of gaslighting? Press D is reinforcing her position as a nurse with its attendant power, credibility, and social standing. She is conveying to the family her care and sense of their grief and loss while adhering to her overarching agenda to remain unidentified as a killer, walking the halls of a supposedly safe and caring institution. If this family glimpsed the face of Satan behind her carefully constructed mask, the flowers and card were meant to ensure that they doubted their own perceptions and fell back on the belief that a nurse, empowered and entrusted to save lives, could not possibly destroy them. A victim's granddaughter recounts a comparable split personality encounter with Press D. The family received the call that their loved one was declining, without knowing, of course, she was being systemically poisoned by her own nurse. When they rushed to her side, Press D, quote, offered them chairs, tissues, and condolences. This describes the surreal meeting with the dark triad who don't feel guilt or remorse for their actions. They can be murdering a vulnerable person while playing the role of caring nurse for the distraught family without any internal crisis or emotional confusion. It's comparable to their ability to lie without any anxiety, as the brain has become comfortable with manipulation to the point of being pathological. Is it possible that gaslighting is so effective because it paints the picture of reality that we want? To leave our loved ones in a care facility or a hospital, we need to believe that they are safe. To put our children in a school, we must believe that the teachers care about them and would never try to harm them or ruin their future. Belief in the systems that govern us is necessary, but perhaps it is time to be more skeptical, less trusting, and use more of our critical thinking. To stay clear and sane, we need to be informed and then vigilant about what is easy and what is hard for our brain. As we will see in the following chapters, our brains can misinterpret what is happening right before our eyes. Once we understand the way our brains are susceptible to lies and manipulation, we can train ourselves to be more aware and less vulnerable. If our brain tends to see what we want to see, is it possible that we see Dr. Jekyll more quickly and easily than we see Mr. Hyde? It's ominous that the split personality uses this weakness of our brain to her advantage. With no sense of guilt or regret, the dark triad are comfortable lying and offering tissues, cards, flowers, chairs, and condolences to the victims that they are scamming and hurting. They only offer these false gestures of care to cover up their murderous lack of care. The agenda they serve is to continue to have power to do harm. As we will learn, it's better always to be prepared for the dark triad. It's better to take the hard path of posing questions, scouring facts, investigating, being skeptical, getting informed on psychopathology and how it manipulates us. In 2009, Hedges diagnosed the illness infecting society as, quote, a culture of narcissism. Faith in ourselves in a world of make-believe is more important than reality. The psychopath's game-like fascination with winning is infectious and fuels such cultural events as the spectacle of pro wrestling. Quote, it is all about winning. It is all about personal pain, vendettas, hedonism, and fantasies of revenge while inflicting pain on others. It is the cult of victimhood. Hedges examines how our culture has come to worship reality as if it's fed to us from television shows. Quote, they tell us that existence is to be centered on the practices and desires of the self, rather than the common good. The ability to lie and manipulate others, the very ethic of capitalism, is held up as the highest good. If lying and manipulating are championed in our culture, it's easier to understand why, in the workplace, we fall repeatedly for psychopathic abusers, why we protect them, why we enable them to harm more targets, why we penalize those who jeopardize our illusion of reality with truth-telling. In 2022, when Merriam-Webster chose gaslighting as the word of the year, it was clear that we have not reversed course. We've dug ourselves deeper into a culture of narcissism. Remember, narcissism, although it may have a genetic component, is seen to emerge from childhood adversity. It's not surprising that a narcissistic culture, one that has failed to halt rampant child abuse, although being informed about it, will produce more and more of this kind of bullying and manipulative conduct. Narcissism begets narcissism, Abuse begets abuse. Hurt brains hurt. The cycle is well established and documented, but it is not halted. It's helpful to maintain your safety and sanity to know that those in the dark triad, including narcissists, do not see their targets as subjects. They objectify others. They position targets as objects that can be maltreated and manipulated in any way that serves the agenda. As we examine in depth next chapter, neuroscientist Simon Baron-Cohen explains that the psychopathic brain suffers from, quote, empathy erosion. Shuttling comfortably from brain scans to philosophy, he uses Martin Buber's famous I and thou way of being that sees others as equals, as subjects with thoughts and feelings, in contrast with the I and it mode of being that sees others as unequal, as objects, as not having thoughts and feelings. When you see someone as a pawn in the game you are playing, it's easy to devalue them, dehumanize them, put them in the outgroup. These objects serve your needs, whether psychological, financial, or reputational. Like so much groundbreaking research into abuse, Buber's philosophical insights emerged through bearing witness to the Holocaust. Although we can understand that those in the dark triad are mentally ill, they have brain deficits in their empathy along with other neurological issues. It can be challenging to understand why we so easily fall for their manipulations. In part 3, we examine ways to strengthen our brain's ability to identify when what we are being told is not true.
Jen, there are comments in the chat here, people celebrating. If there's anyone who would like to turn on your microphone and give Jen your initial reactions, you're more than welcome to. Yes, Bali.
Yeah, I was particularly touched by the comment that the lawyer Julie McFarlane made on it was page 148, where she said that the shattering of her belief system was the most traumatic thing about the whole experience. Because I think all of us before we got involved in whistleblowing or reporting harassment or abuse or whatever happened to us, we kind of trusted that the regulatory agencies, the legal system, or the people inside the company cared about wrongdoing and would be motivated to try to fix it if we reported it. And it's just so disorienting, to find out that all of the systems are rigged in favor of whoever has the money and the power and the resources, regardless of who's telling the truth. And I think that's really traumatizing. I knew that things like that happened in the criminal legal system because there are organizations like the Innocence Project that try to help people who've been like wrongfully convicted that are on death row. So I knew that those kind of problems existed, but I didn't realize how deep and pervasive they were until I got involved in whistleblowing and then talking to other whistleblowers from different countries, different industries, where we all had exactly the same experience. And I did want to also just kind of repeat what Dr. Fraser said, that I think a majority of people that have high ACEs scores actually become defenders of other people, not bullies. And so that's an interesting research question. What distinguishes the people that, don't become monsters and become helpers and defenders from the people that just repeat the abuse they experience? That's an interesting question. Thank you.
Thank you, as always. I think Heliana probably can share with us an insight into that. I only wanted to quickly say there's really wonderful research on how it takes one single loving, mentoring, intervening, believes you, supports you, your grandma, your teacher, a coach, someone, a friend even, who validates what you experience and shows up for you and is there for you. That can work wonders in tilting the balance from someone who repeats harm to someone who becomes a defender of others and someone who speaks up and fights for the truth. Heliana, is that right?
Yes, absolutely. And and it's making me think of two things. When Jen and I first started working together on this, I don't even remember what the thing was, but I had to ask for us to like course redirect in some way. And I had this moment of panic. This woman whose work I respect so deeply. I mean, her bullied brain book really was key to my own healing from workplace trauma. So I cannot overstate how important it is for me and what a gift it is to work with Jen. I was terrified to ask for this thing because when that has happened in the past with me in workplaces, in a toxic workplace, it was lethal. Prior to that toxic workplace experience, I didn't have this terror that would come up. And it took the first time of me kind of trepidatiously going like, Jen, is this okay? And I was so apologetic and blah, blah, blah. And she was so incredibly lovely and came back and was like, oh yeah, that's not even a thing. And I was like, oh, okay. So this relationship, this collegial relationship with Jen is literally healing parts of me, parts of my workplace trauma that's lingered. And so I just want to put that out there. Be very careful to like, is this person safe enough for me to check in with? If that's the case, then I'm going to take that risk. And every time that I take that risk, and it's with somebody like Jen, who is kind and generous and humble, then it grows a new neural pathway that like, oh, some people can be trusted. Yes, there are some dangerous predators out there, but there are also people like Jen. And so now she's not gonna be able to get rid of me because I'm such a Jen Fraser fan. So that's part of it. And I can't overstate how much that means to me, Jen. Thank you. I think the piece for many of us who don't become the monster, it's because there was early on some pathway that was developed where somebody, like Jen was saying, there's somebody who helps us to know that you can be safe somewhere. For one of my clients who went through excruciating trauma throughout their early childhood, that relationship was with a dog. I cannot overstate enough that there's like, it's co-regulation of nervous systems and having somebody who sees us and who is able to sit with our pain and respond to our need, whatever it is. When we're babies, it's I'm hungry, I need a diaper change, I need some sleep. If there's somebody there who can do it at least 30% of the time, meet the need, mirror the need with the actual response, that's part of what can help. But then there are other people who it seems like we have an incredible amount of empathy towards others, and that part of our brain doesn't get turned off by the cruelty that we've experienced. So I bet there's some piece also in here about the neuroscience. But Roy, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. I'll be very brief. I don't want to embarrass Jen, but I can't praise her enough for what she's done and what she continues to do. She's been of immense help to me, always there to listen, humbly, respectfully, insightfully. So Jen, thank you for what you can do and for the inspirational stuff that you do and the reassurance that you give. What I'm going to say next from a drought-ridden UK, and we've not had any rain for 2 months. It's just awful. And climate change is here with us big time. I just want to say some of you may have heard about the tragic death yesterday of Professor Jason Ardley, who was a black academic, aged 41, from Cambridge. He was autistic, neurodivergent, but he had excelled. It's likely he committed suicide because of ongoing bullying, racist bullying, class-based bullying. It's been horrendous, absolutely horrendous, led by the right. And it reduced me to tears. This poor man, he was kind, he was gentle, he was a one-off. There's skills and qualities that he brought, and they ribbed him mercilessly. So, watch this space. It's caused such a time for reflection in the UK now because we have to be better than this. We really must be better than this. He was accused of plagiarism and fantasizing, and academics, all of us, and I've got a doctorate like some others. We've all copied bits that we shouldn't have done. We've all done it. We've all done it, and yet they targeted him in a brutal way. So sorry, I've got it out of me now because you can see I'm quite emotional about it. So thank you. I'll stop there.
Yeah, when you told me about that yesterday, I was pretty destabilized. In fact, I was so shocked that my husband said to me, "What? What?" Like my reaction was so intense. I think my takeaway from that is, you know, it goes back to what Bali was saying, this idea that you look out at the world and you see people behaving. I mean, if someone's done something wrong, you still don't attack them. You don't. What also got me was all these public attacks, as if these people are themselves are on pedestals, as you say, Roy, and they've never done anything wrong in their lives, and so they feel justified to publicly pour all these words when they don't even really know. It's just like, and somebody, Pauline, was it you? Anyways, somebody said in the chat, they were saying, well, we are told not to be a bully all through our childhood, but when you turn 18, 19, you get carte blanche to act as an adult bully, and it's just so destructive. I mean, words alone can drive someone to take their own life. So should we not all be measured and judicious and empathic and only use our words when we've done the proper thinking and it's going to help the public interest? All of those people weighing in on this professor. And anyway, I'm with you, Roy. I don't even have words for this. It just was a blow to me yesterday. It's so racist and sick.
Yeah, I'm horrified to hear this, Roy. And I remember hearing about the public mobbing that was happening to him as it was happening leading up to this. And we've lost also recently Dr. Candia Bailey, who was a brilliant Black academic. She was head of student affairs at a historically Black college and university, and she died by bullycide as well after seeking help. And this can happen to any of us. This is why I call it a mental injury. This is not mental illness, this is mental injury, and it literally can happen to anyone. It's the nervous system crashing when we are unable to fight or flee, which is our trauma response, then we can collapse. And there's really good news that there's a lot that can be done to help a person who's experiencing a suicidal crisis in the moment to get back to a sense of safety. So I'm going to drop a couple of points into or resources into the chat for us. And please do not hesitate to reach out. I want to stop myself now and just invite Michelle. I see your hand is up as well.
Yeah, thanks for raising the issue of Dr. Jason Arde. Last week, many of us across the world tried to sign a letter to let him know that we saw his tremendous accomplishments and we could see the truth of what was happening, because he had said that he had had enough. And now I love the term that you use, sadly, that it has to be a term, bullicide, but he didn't take his life. They took it from him. And I think, and it was anti-Black racism, and it's that added layer that we who are Black professionals experience when we experience the workplace violence. And it's that layer that lots of people fall away, right? And don't want to support us because they don't want to. This chapter was really hard, but it was good because it was about enablers, right? And the truth is, these people can't reign if they didn't have so many enablers, right? And people who don't make it through this, right? This world crashing shit that we all have to endure, that's like endless. People who don't make it through this, it's because the systems, and systems are people, murdered them. To me, it's as simple as that. And until people both get jailed and have huge financial penalties under the law, this is going to continue. But I think also we can stop it if people just aren't enablers. But I would say, like, it's been a hard for me, 24 hours, because even watching the coverage, all people repeat is the lies. Actually, he was found to make a few minor mistakes that I don't know anyone who hasn't done doctoral work or citing work hasn't achieved in and of themselves. And, I used to say to my team, human, like we're not perfect, but then again, nothing in nature is. So it's wonderfully compatible. And no one leads with he was these witch hunts that were called these quote unquote investigations, which that's another. No one leads with that. Those were part of the bullying. No one leads with that. No one leads with even with their shitty piece of shit witch hunts, like Salem witch hunts. They didn't find that he actually did anything wrong. No one leads with that. To me, when you're talking about this case, he is a professor who had to stand down to try to live, and he still died. And I would encourage everyone to, if you think about this, read News Court and see the factual sightings about how he was completely hounded. But again, I want to just emphasize systems are people. Systems aren't these like nebulous things that are out there. They're animated by people for the benefit of some to the destruction of others, and there is intent in it, right? I know when I'm extracting something. Every people do know about extraction. And so yeah, it's been really hard and not to go really long, but I can't even emphasize it enough that there's an extra layer when you're Black and when you're somewhat accomplished and when you're put in these spaces and like it, the Roys of the world who bring it up and who care, like those are the people that we actually turn to in the midst of the storms. Because sometimes even for the benefits, people who look like us even turn against us. And this is what happened to Jason. And I just want you to remember, like it's easy to say that he completed suicide or he died by suicide and all these euphemisms, but he was murdered. Call it like you say, bullicide. This was not he said he had enough last week. And lots of people tried, but you know what? You can't overcome like the I think this chapter helped put into words the weight of what falls upon one single solitary person. And I can't leave myself. So when I experience this, multiple layers of oppression, even if I had no ACEs, right? Just experiencing this, like the workplace abuse alone is enough to kill you. The anti-Black racism is intended to kill you. And then evolving from childhood difficulties can kill you. And the one last thing I want to say, not to take up too much airtime, but I think it's really important because no matter what happens next, Jason is never going to come back. In his last days and weeks were hell, and it was all unnecessary. And he didn't do anything particularly wrong or interesting. And I'd love to just explain something about citation just quickly. The chain of ideas is a bullshit concept that comes from white supremacy who thinks it gets to own stuff. Nobody came up with, out of the brilliance of their own mind, something brand spanking new that was untouched by millions of minds and all the spaces in between everything you've read, heard, or experienced. So when you jump on that silly little intellectual property plagiarism ban, you're doing the work of the oppressor. You are the oppressor. And I think it's just something to really to really think deeply about. We don't own all the things we think we own. And so yeah, sorry, I appreciate you bringing it up because to me it's I'm in Canada and it's been something that we've been worrying about for weeks. And you can see the strength of these conglomerates of harm.
I just wanted to, well, Michelle, oh God. Roy has said in the notes that Simon Baron Cohen, who's one of my heroes, um, very much tried to support Jason. And he would have, because he's one of the world leading experts in not only scholarly work, but autism. And he also, as we will talk about next week, the whole chapter's about his work. It's Simon Baron Cohen that gives us the best understanding of the non-empathic brain that, like you say, Michelle, is just, it somehow thinks it has the right to use language and ideas and in use it as a chain to oppress and harm and hurt people. And yeah, it's this loss of language, I guess, that most breaks my heart. And just to reiterate what you were saying, it's Shakespeare who said 500 years ago, there's nothing new under the sun. It's like this trying to own. And yeah, it's very, very heartbreaking on so many levels. I wrote an article for Psychology Today looking at the research on how to be suffering anti-Black racism specifically is correlated in the science with living with chronic pain. It's like having a migraine, and it feels that bad day in, day out. The more you're exposed to it, that's how the brain interprets it as being repeatedly wounded and harmed. And yeah, I mean, the fact that we're in the 21st century and we still don't seem to have an understanding that you can you can coerce someone by your behavior, your words, without touching their body. What you're doing is systemically damaging their brain. This is what bully brain was all about. I've seen it personally. I've seen someone driven to suicide. So yeah, it's just massively heartbreaking.
Yeah, I am so grateful, Roy and Michelle, that you spoke so directly to this. Um, hmm. Yeah, I think for many of us here have known people who have died by suicide. Many of us have had suicidal crises. And this is what happens. It can happen to anybody. It can happen to anybody. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of deficiency. It is literally wired into our brains that just like a lizard who's being chased by a hawk who suddenly goes limp, or a possum because it cannot fight or flee, it's essentially that is happening inside of us. And the good news is that those stress hormones can be metabolized in the body pretty quickly if we can get a sense of safety. And the problem is that if you're living in a systemically racist world, where do you have safety? Where is that safety? And for many of us who have had very severe early childhood traumas, which include systemic racism, exposure to systemic racism, have we ever had a sense of felt safety? And our peoples have known also how to survive these systems. And so there's a lot of medicine that's in our ancestries. We talk about how we have epigenetic risk factors. We also have epigenetic strengths and resiliencies, and it's in the stories of our peoples and how they have survived. And so staying tethered also to that source of hope and strength in one another, that we show up here today, that Jen has the incredible courage and clarity of mind to be able to not only take her own history, transmogrify it, and then do all this research, and then write a book, and then be able to show up here and read it to us. It is so powerful to know that we can come back from this. But it does require us to show up for each other. And Michelle, to hear the outpouring of love that came from Black people, and I would hope also other communities as well who can see it and could say, sir, we see this pain, we see what they're doing to you. Roy, I see you've turned on your microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, but may I just add one quick thing? The reason I'm so sensitive to this is because I have two Black grandsons. My daughter adopted them when they're babies, and I think the world of them. They're bright, they're great kids, and they've got a future ahead of them. But I worry like mad about the future that's lying in wait for them. Let me just. This is them when they were much younger. They both have really good IQ. They're both talented. They're articulate, confident. They haven't encountered racism yet, but sure as hell they're going to do. And I worry about that. So that's why I get quite emotional on these things. So thank you.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, Roy. And I would really encourage, if you didn't ask for any feedback, but because you're in community, Black women have raised Black babies in racist societies since the beginning of time. And there's so much wisdom that can be, connecting to help those Black children grow up as safe as possible. My youngest brother is Dana Atham, Indigenous, and I had to tell him about if he's pulled over by police, where to put his hands. And because our mother's phenotypically white, she didn't know how to tell him how to be as safe as possible in society. And so it means so much to have somebody who has whiteness and male privilege to be aware in the way that you are. Thank goodness for you. Um, and your daughter and her partner, how lovely that these children get to be in a family who loves them so much as well. So just wanted to acknowledge that there's so much self-defense and protectionism that Black women have also, and Black men too, have learned along the way in terms of that survival. I wonder if there's anyone else who would like to turn on their microphone and jump into this conversation. Acknowledging also that for many of us, we're talking about all the big things at the same time. And so it can be intense to hear these things and to come back into a place that we can speak.
Really glad you raised that. I can't remember if I use the term double bind. As soon as you describe it, I'm just right there with you. It's like we all know that you don't, it's like you don't want to talk with young people about suicide because you don't want them to think about suicide, and you don't want them to start to get afraid, and you don't want to tell them about racism because it's just so absolutely hellish and horrendous, and you want them to remain innocent and full of wonder and confident and able to make their own way in a just world, but you have to protect them at the same time. So I think it's a great concept, and we can maybe keep applying it as we go through to various moments. I wanted it's an interesting thing for me with bully side that Eliana was talking about, because it's almost like another double bind in the way that you're describing it, Carla, where, suicide, it's the it's taking away your own life, suicide. But bully side is you can't stand to have the internalized aggressor within you for another minute. Like they are. And so in order to kill the bully, you have to sacrifice yourself. And if that isn't the most profound double bind out there, I don't know what is. I think it's the most horrendous example of what you are so rightly bringing to the fore here, because it's part of this bullying and abuse paradigm that we all get caught in this horrible circle. So yeah. So there wasn't really any kind of an answer. I don't know if I talk about it or not, but here I am going on and on with my brain going in 800 different directions.
A lot of coming into awareness about what gaslighting is, it's the loss of illusion. We haven't, and what privilege does for us, privilege gives us the illusion of safety when there's not really safety. So my mother, who was white, didn't know to tell my brother, who was brown, to be wary about police pulling him over, because she has the privilege of not being at risk of being shot by a police officer. That never would have occurred to her. And it's not any defect of her. I'm so glad for her that she didn't have to live with that terror. And I feel like so much of what's happening in the workplace, conversation around workplace abuse and bullying and so on, is that the illusions are starting to fall. And the terror that comes about when we realize, oh, some of these people are actually extremely unsafe. Oh, I just did something by keeping myself quiet, whether I chose to or because my nervous system froze. I saw someone being bullied right there at work and I didn't step in. And that survivor's guilt that we can have afterwards, that we're having illusions fall even about ourselves. And that's why I find so much hope in Jen's work, is because she brings us back to the neuroscience. This is not a failing of our values or anything. It's like, no, the nervous system and the brain will collapse in a certain way. When the amygdala comes on, the alarm system, the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part that enables us to problem solve, that enables us to have a sense of who we are, time even, it goes offline. And so the question for me, and where I go back to as a therapist, oftentimes with my clients, is like, how do we first create a sense of safety in the body right now? The faster that we can help the body to feel as safe as possible, the more quickly the thinking part of the brain can come up and identify alternatives. And so you'll see me in group here. When I start swaying, that's literally me regulating my nervous system. And the reason why apparently that helps is because when we're in the womb, when the pregnant person is walking, that's when the fetus tends to go to sleep. So it's wired into us already. And I do this in meetings, in work meetings. I'll sit in an office chair, rock forward and backward. People don't know that I'm regulating my nervous system. They think I'm just sitting in an office chair. So there are things that we can do, and I would recommend or put out there the book my Grandmother's Hands by Dr. Resmaa Menakem, because he talks about the nervous system and culture and systemic racism and how all of us, whether we are melanated or without melanation, can learn to engage in somatic abolitionism. How we help our nervous systems and our brains develop the sense of safety necessary to show up for these conversations of anti-racism and become actors who are behaving in alignment with our values. And I think that helps with the double bind a bit, but I'll pause there and see if anyone else wanted to jump into the conversation.
I would just say about the double bind and anti-Black racism, it doesn't really exist, right? Like, you as a Black woman, we must tell our children the truth about what their experience is, or they will die. It's just like you don't let your toddler run into oncoming traffic. Us to pretend that there's no anti-Black racism and pretend that it's not fatal, because all of the structures that we live under are rigged against us, and that's not our imagination. That is actually fact. And because we're race-lit so much of the time, you have to tell children in an age-appropriate way. So it's not, there's no, we have to be careful that they don't understand. We have to try to preserve. The world doesn't see our children as children, right? So we're objectified, like very much like it says in the chapter, but we don't get a childhood like a white child, like a brown child, right? And so there is not really, yes, you do in a certain respect if your parents are lovely, but you have to go out into the world. And so, there is no double bind in anti-Black racism. You really have to tell a child straight. You have to tell them often. I'm just saying, like, there is no neutral place in the life of a Black person, not to say that we don't know joy, and that not to say that we're not able to find some healing within ourselves in the community of people who love us, who look like us and don't look like us. But I think everything about anti-Black racism is about gaslighting. No, they didn't mean that. No, that actually didn't happen. No, you have a bad attitude. No, you're the angry. And I think it's really important because it's very similar to workplace bullying. And if you're Black, you experience both simultaneously.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for saying that. And the piece that not that there's, in addition to there not being a double bind, having to hold that intensity and still communicate in a way that's clear takes an extreme amount of an extreme amount of toll that takes on the brain and the nervous system and the heart and the spirit. And that sorrow and that grief, it's in this lifetime, and it's ancestral as well. And so when it gets activated in the workplace, of course, the injury is going to lead to premature death. It's going to lead to the heart disease and the diabetes and the cancers and the strokes early on. And we've seen a number of Black women who were in very prominent positions in universities across the United States in a very short period of time who had repeated heart attacks and other things in public on stages because the toll that it takes. There is a book that talks about how contemporary HR practices were literally developed during chattel slavery. And so when we talk about how what is the abuse, that's racialized abuse that's tied to our labor, that is, it's not a metaphor. It's literally, I'll put the book in the chat here. But I would just say also, and I felt it when I was mobbed out of a job. My grandfather was picked up during the society-wide mobbing that was happening with the US police departments taking Mexicanos from their beds at night. And what's happening right now with ICE in the United States is that happening. It's a massive level of society-wide mobbing that we're all seeing. And so I think that us being able to have a space like this where we can say the things and we can help to educate one another and be present to each other's wounding and figuring out, and how do we show up as allies? And part of that is knowing that how we can be courageous right now. And so I just first want to acknowledge the courage and the toll that it would take for you to share that here. Janet, I see your hand is up.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
thanks
sorry,
very much.
Jen. I'm sorry, Jen first. So sorry.
It's funny, my mom's name is Janet, so I've been called Janet all my life. So when you said Janet, I was like, yep, right here. Sorry, Janet, I'll be fast. I just wanted to say, Michelle, I have absolutely no words, but if I could, I would reach into your Zoom and just give you a big hug. That's the only thing I can offer or think of. And just kind of, well, it's like what Bally said about just being kind of sickened by all these human.
You didn't do anything wrong, and there's nothing that you need to rephrase.
No.
You've just read us like so much brilliance, and we're processing it in our own ways with what's going on. And you're so humble that you're there for that. And then you're able to come back to us about like what's going on, what we've just raised. It's truly remarkable to see this. And I'm so grateful to you in that way.
Likewise, yeah. Eliana and I have to stop fangirling all the time. It's just the worst. I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing it just be like, no, it's you. This whole thing, it's you. Because I worship the ground she walks on, which everybody obviously knows. So thank you all for coming. It was wonderful. You're the most courageous, amazing people. You're so thoughtful, so able to be powerful and vulnerable. And yeah, we really appreciate it. We are trying to all make change together, as Eliana says. So thank you. Couldn't do it without you.
And on that note, we would really, really, really appreciate you helping us by giving us feedback about these sessions. Everybody, all of us, you and us, we're all taking a chance in doing this because this is not therapy. It is, just something, it's a book group. And we hope to not hurt people when we do this. And we hope that people get something from it as well. And so we put together these surveys at the end that we read every single survey response from people. And it helps us so that we can reduce the chances that we do anything that might cause unintentional harm, and that we keep the things going that are helpful to people. So that's why we do the survey. That's why we ask for your feedback. I'm getting the link for you right now. It's going to say the wrong chapter, but that's okay. Just know if you take the time, it literally can take just like 2 minutes to fill this out. It would really, really help us. And Jen has been so incredibly generous to offer to do a raffle of her book, signed copy. So if you would please take the time to complete the survey, that would be so helpful. If you want to be entered into a raffle but not have your answers on the surveys related to one another, feel free to send me an email and just let me know you want to be in the raffle. That's another way to keep them separate. Really encourage folks, this is a big one, really encourage people to drink extra water, get outside. If you can get around trees, large bodies of water, just move, make eye contact with somebody else, even if it's somebody who's selling something at a grocery store. If you're lucky enough to be around a cat or dog, do things that bring your body pleasure. That I think is one of the fastest ways to help our body come back to a sense of safety as well. Thank you all so much for being here. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.